The Flash, Elemental, Indiana Jones, and the Dial of Destiny. They all have in common that they are well-known films to have flopped at the box office recently. Another film is part of that category, though, in Ruby Gillman Teenage Kraken, a film in the world of DreamWorks that had some pretty atrocious marketing after how well DreamWorks did with Puss in Boots: The Last Wish and The Bad Guys. But nonetheless, this is still a decent DreamWorks film and deserves a place in the DreamWorks universe. However, like I mentioned before, it didn't do well at the box office at all. A couple months ago, I created the DreamWorks Theory inspired by the Pixar Theory, but with a lot less issues compared to that theory, which, after the film Elemental, you would think would end the videos on this topic, but no, it did not. This theory proposes that this world, the DreamWorks world, began with the Croods, where the cavemen and humans interact and come across animals, where some are more magical and mystical than others. As time passes and humans evolve, they begin to see themselves as superior to these magical creatures, where in Shrek they enslave them, and in How to Train Your Dragon, they killed the dragons. These events lead to many of the dragons and other magical creatures having to go into hiding like the trolls from Troll Hunters, and talking animals acting like normal animals, similar to how we saw Puss do in his new movie The Last Wish. Eventually, we see these talking animals fight back for their power with the help of magic given to them by the boy on the moon shown at the beginning of every DreamWorks movie, and playing a large role of the godlike being in Rise of the Guardians. This led to the rise of the world we saw in Kung Fu Panda, where it's commonplace for animals to have magic abilities like Kung Fu granting you the power of Chi, and there even being sorcerers in England as shown in the new show The Dragon Knight. After I made the initial video, I then made another explaining how 2D films like Prince of Egypt and Sinbad fit into the DreamWorks Theory. But now with a new entry into this world, welcome to Big Flick Energy, and it's time to discuss how Ruby Gillman, Teenage Kraken, fits into the DreamWorks Theory, and let me just say, it actually explains a lot. For starters, the trailers revealed the main way it will fit in by establishing that our protagonist, Ruby Gillman, is a Kraken living amongst people of this world in modern day. She looks different and has to hide her different side, but there's another sea creature hiding amongst the masses in the form of a mermaid by the name of Nerissa, which blends into society much more easily by the way she looks. All of this is confirmed when actually watching the film, where we also meet Ruby's family, and most importantly, her mother Agatha and grandmother Grandmama. Now, her family is a clear differentiation from what we've heard in the past of magical creatures blending in with humans to not get attacked by them. Rather, they chose to blend in to live a normal life away from being royalty back in the kingdom of the Krakens, the kingdom that apparently rules the Seven Seas, which is pretty important and is something we'll get back to soon. It's to the point that when Ruby eventually becomes her natural form by going in the water, she sees herself as a monster, and when videos of a massive Kraken go viral, everybody goes crazy calling this beast a monster as well, where there's even a captain in the town of Oceanside saying he's seen a Kraken before, showing that there are some skeptics in the world already about these magical creatures being amongst us, especially considering the events of Monsters vs. Aliens happened about 20 years before this film. The way humans react shows how Krakens have been misconstrued by humans as terrible creatures of mythology, showing that the stories the world tells of these creatures aren't true, and that humans have made these creatures out to look like the villains of the story. Krakens are thought of as creatures that terrorize sailors and destroy ships. All this while keeping the mermaid as the hero we see in our world in fairy tales today. Sounds similar to Shrek, right? In those films, we see the magical creatures be looked down upon by humans to the point where they're all forced to leave their homes and move in with Shrek. We see this for magical creatures, except for the fairy godmother. Yes, she's a magical creature, but she looks human and is pushed as a hero in all the fairy tale stories, similar to the mermaid, even though she's one of the worst creatures of them all. Seeing as the Krakens are in hiding in modern day, it shows the similarity between this and Troll Hunters, where the trolls can't leave their home underground because they'll be looked at as monsters. This is until the end of the film where, spoiler alert, Ruby Gillman defeats Nerissa the mermaid and the town of Oceanside begins seeing her as the hero of the story. Which makes one think, what went wrong to cause these magical creatures to rise up above humans? For one, this film shows us an outlier of magical creatures wanting to live amongst the humans, whereas we even see Grandmama see humans as horrible creatures even though she doesn't seem to care that much if her daughter chooses to live amongst them. Similar outliers like this happen like with the captain's pet crab Davy, evidently being extremely intelligent by driving a boat, and similar creatures that just want to live in harmony like in the film Home with Tip's pet cat, and the animals in Madagascar like Alex longing for the days he was respected by the humans in the zoo. And not to mention Wallace and Gromit, which is another video I'll be making when a new Aardman film drops, speaking about how those films, which are DreamWorks properties, fit into the DreamWorks Theory. There will always be outliers, but we care about the stronger animals and creatures like Dr. Cockroach saying he wanted to take over the world, or with Archie, the talking cat that can switch forms into a dragon from the show Wizards, saying cats don't have the right to vote, and neither do dragons, yet. With more showings of heroics for magical creatures, the more easily those with bad intentions will be able to eventually take over. So yes, Oceanside now loves their heroic Kraken, but you see they view her differently still, and not as an equal, similar to how the heroes from Monsters vs. Aliens were viewed as heroes, not as equals. Now let me switch gears to another big way this film ties into the DreamWorks Theory with the Kingdom of the Krakens. Grandmama mentions that she is the ruler of the seven seas with a couple of different beings trying to take her power, like the Leviathan, the Umibozo, and Mermaids, which establishes how we haven't even nipped the surface of how many magical creatures roam this world. Also, I just want to mention this isn't the first time we've met mermaids in the world of DreamWorks. In the TV show The Adventures of Puss in Boots, we meet Fiji and Brad, which are hideous as mer people go. As described in a Change.org article on this episode, Season 2, Episode 3 of The Adventures of Puss in Boots focuses on the unwanted attention Puss receives from a Fiji mermaid. For those of you unfamiliar with Fiji mermaids, they were a popular hoax of the freak show era and were created by sewing the torsos of monkeys to fishes' tails. Once mummified, these monkey fish were put on display and were said to originate from the islands of Fiji, hence the name Fiji mermaids. I believe this difference can then be attested to one of two things. The first being these mer people we saw in that show were from the Fiji area and are not the same type of mermaids as Narissa. The other thing that could be happening is since this show takes place 1,000 years before Ruby Gillman, mermaids have evolved to blend into society, as it seems they were the first intelligent sea creatures to interact with humans in The Adventures of Puss in Boots. By adapting, they eventually either evolved or became hybrids by mating with humans, but as seen when mermaids grow larger, similar to krakens, they revert back to a scaly body, similar to Fiji and Brad. Now back to Ruby Gillman. When Grandmama mentioned being the ruler of the seven seas though, it made me think about the world we saw in Shark Tale. In my initial video, I spoke on how that film takes place in the future around the time of Kung Fu Panda, but we never had an actual timeline for it. Instead, I now think it takes place closer to present day than previously thought. Because of the world we see in Shark Tale, I believe it is the work of the future queen of the seven seas, Ruby Gillman. When we explore the oceans in Ruby Gillman, it looks normal until we arrive at the Kingdom of the Krakens, which looks like an ancient civilization, but only occupied by krakens and jellyfish, which act as servants to the queen. It's kind of ironic to see this when we've been talking so negatively about humans in the world of DreamWorks, but the oceans under Grandmama have been the same, with the development of other sea creatures being left behind, where Ruby can communicate with whales, but they still act like the whales we see today, and Grandmama mentions having a therapist that's a wise hammerhead shark. There's a clear difference between Ruby and her grandmother, where her grandmother just describes her therapist as a wide hammerhead shark, giving no individuality to this being, whereas Ruby calls the whale by his name, Clarence. I believe this shows a clear change in power for when Ruby becomes queen, which we know is most likely what will happen in the future, as she becomes the protector of the oceans at the end of this film, having to fight off what her family calls a devil whale, and her grandmama mentioning how she's still next in line, and Ruby's mom Agatha doesn't say no, but instead just says that conversation can wait for another day. With Ruby as queen, and the way she treats other sea life like Clarence the whale and her pet Nessie, it seems like she'll be a queen for all sea life, not just the krakens like the previous queen was. With her wanting to live in both the human world and the world of the ocean, I wouldn't be surprised if she also helped build up societies in the ocean inspired by the world she saw around her, eventually leading to a society in Shark Tale with stores like Old Wavy instead of Old Navy, and Gup instead of Gap, and Coral Cola instead of Coca-Cola. Not to mention, they're even apparently celebrating Tuna History Month in this film, as the oceans have become a society trying to give equality to all sea kind, and we see that in Shark Tale. However, as we saw on the surface in a film like The Bad Guys, we see again in Shark Tale, with the way other sea creatures see the scary animals like the sharks, that equality in both of these worlds is, at this point, still an illusion. So with Ruby Gillman, Teenage Kraken, it gives us another example of the way humans see magical creatures, where they need to be in hiding and how misconstrued these fairy tale stories are, making mermaids and fairy godmothers to be the heroes, when the real heroes are the Krakens and the ogres. It also gives an explanation as to how the oceans in Shark Tale have a society so similar to ours, and it's through the future queen of the seven seas, Ruby Gillman. Given they use modern phones without a home button in this film, and they mention video game live streams, this film can be placed in the modern day around May 2023 since it's prom season. This sets this film between the B-movie and Mr. Peabody and Sherman in the 2010s, and Shark Tale and the bad guys in the near future, establishing that animals have already shown their intelligence, which is probably why Davy the Crab driving a boat isn't the craziest thing that's happened, but that animals have also not yet become leaders in the world. So with Ruby Gillman, Teenage Kraken, we have another entry into the world of DreamWorks, and into the DreamWorks Theory, and I cannot wait to see what's next for this world. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment on the DreamWorks Theory as a whole, or if you think this film fits in, or anything else. Please subscribe, and see you next time on Big Flick Energy.